In April 2016, I became the first youth delegate of Hungary to the United Nations. It was the outcome of a 2-year joint endeavor with the government to ensure that our young people, young Hungarians, are given a seat at the high table of international affairs. Fast forward a few months, and I made my first trip to the headquarters of the UN in New York. Suddenly, my colleagues and I found ourselves delivering speeches, negotiating resolutions, and also exchanging thoughts on the crucial challenges of the future. With world leaders, I even had a meeting with the then Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and I really felt we had traction. But a year and countless handshakes later, I asked myself, András, what have you really achieved? And I was troubled. Surely I did things. I shaped the perspectives of decision makers, strengthened alliances with other youth advocates, and I raised young Hungarians' awareness of sustainable development in all our 19 counties. Not the least, I managed to set up the Hungarian UN Youth Delegate program, which just celebrated its 4th generation coming into office this year. But looking at it close up, I couldn't find any large-scale, tangible result. The word remained the same. Nothing really changed. It was the type of frustration you feel at the climate protests. You go out every Friday, move around the city with a great bunch of amazing and dedicated people, and you're all across the media. Yet, climate change is still there. In fact, it's just getting worse. Even if you get millions of signatures on a petition, things look stuck. Have you ever felt like this? Have you ever felt powerless to be able to change the challenges that face us? Raise your hands if you ever felt. Yeah, just look around the room for a moment. Coming from here, you wonder, is our voice really heard? Are we changing anything if we feel this powerless? And the answer is, yes, it is, and yes, we are. Now you think, wait, this guy is confusing me, so let me explain. In the past 2 years, I've been building an organization, Visegrad for Sustainability, that deals with strengthening partnership for the UN's Sustainable Development Goals between governments, business sectors, ordinary civilians, pretty much everyone. Through our process, I had an excellent opportunity to observe different actors' perspectives and how they are shaped. I found that our advocacy is heard, taken into account. Gradually, it also influences decisions. But it doesn't go deep enough. Yes, Greta shocks everyone with her brutally honest speeches on climate change. But for 3 days. Essentially, the change we produce is too superficial compared to the depth and momentum of the phenomena we address. Now, I guess you don't like that, right? Why would you? Our future literally hangs by the thread. So let's see why we don't win and what we can do to change that. I will give you 3 points. It's a really personal take, and in it, I will focus on sustainability and climate change, because these are the definitive challenges of our time, important for us, future generations. First, assets. Our words don't carry weight because we lack assets. We don't command networks of power. We don't propose solutions and deals. We don't vote. We just march. But simply taking to the streets doesn't count anymore. Well, yes, leaders will notice, yet they won't be compelled to act because we don't have bargaining chips. But we could. So how? We are dedicated activists. We have the manpower to build alliances and connect the representatives of different sectors, from business to NGOs, to work with us for the cause. We go fast alone, but as in every case, far together. We should organize into structures, not just movements, construct our own networks of power, learn its tricks, and use it for purpose. We also have knowledge, young researchers and professionals, so we could roll out consultancies, startups, and think tanks in droves, providing actual solutions, innovation, and implementation. Then we must open up to our leaders. Let's knock on that door and offer our help. My experience is when we walk in with the right pitch and deal, they are keen to do business, and doing business would prove our ability to lead. And we are the many. A great bunch of passionate people willing to spend hours at protests in rain, snow, and thunder. If we are so sturdy, sure as hell we could vote too. And voting means much more than 1,000 posts on Facebook about melting icebergs, because it directly influences the distribution of power. Shouting climate action loudly may draw attention, but for deep impact, productive action is required. Summing it up, networks of power, solutions, and votes. These are the assets we absolutely need to be able to bargain. Second, complexity. I challenge you to embrace complexity. We think in vague terms and have close to zero understanding of the issues underlying the challenges we address. We push easy answers, but sometimes get shot in the leg by our very own points. Let me demonstrate this with an example from a former prime minister of a German federal state I just talked with a month ago. We protest against taking flights. We want people to travel by train. We want people to do this now. Currently, in Germany, taking a train costs a fortune, lines are overcrowded, and delays are regular. To change that, we need to develop the network, right? Our first instinct is to say that the government did a horrible job. Why don't they invest more? Why can't this process move quicker? Then you take a closer look and you realize that when building rails, due to environmental regulation and protest, it can take over 10 years from the proposal to the first brick laid. 10 years. If we have 12 years to stop climate change, we don't have time for this. We need to better understand where and why should we make compromises or give concessions. And for that, simple, incendiary messages must give way to complex thinking. I'm not saying that from now on we shouldn't protect our neighborhoods when building rails, but we do need to check whether it always makes sense in terms of the big picture. Last but not least, targets. I urge you to observe trends and pick your targets effectively. Since 1990, the European Union has decreased its CO2 emissions by 22%, while the rest of the world increased it by 63.5%. Today, we account for less than 1/5 of global emissions, a share that is shrinking by the day. We must understand that climate change isn't an issue we can solve in Europe. We go nuts when one of our member states commits only to 90% instead of full climate neutrality, yet none of us, I bet none of you, have ever protested in front of an embassy of one of the worst polluters who have never even come close to any such measures and emit much more than we do. Well, of course, the reason the EU does so well compared to the others is connected to continuous activism on the issue. So we shouldn't stop applying pressure. That's not what I'm saying. But we should still seek where to apply more pressure. We could go beyond countries too. For example, the rich pollute way more than the poor, so it is only fair that we make them pay more for it. Or we should consider whether it is worthy to invest 10 euros in Europe for the same positive environmental impact we could have for €1 in India. In sum, we need to allocate our resources effectively by picking the fights that yield the most. At the same time, we should also make sure that we clear our backyard, our own backyard, in a way we don't hurt our global competitiveness. Degrowth, in this case, won't really work. Otherwise, who else will carry the torch? Other powers seem much less interested in making this change happen, so we cannot afford to ruin our economies in this process. We need to utilize change to become stronger. So let me do a recap. These are the things I think we should add to protest. 1, assets, networks of power, solutions, and votes. 2, complexity, embracing it and learning where and when to compromise. 3, targets, observing, doing your research, and picking the best fights. Again, let me emphasize, this is not to say that protest is not useful. It is. It has proved to be useful. Fridays for Future has had a profound impact on how we feel about climate change. It has empowered countless people to share their concerns. But now, it is time for more. It is time to grasp this attention and turn it into productive power. It is time to act instead of marching. And action is not just about personal things. It's not only about carrying a multi-use water bottle or cycling instead of driving. It is primarily about these large macro structures, about driving global change and reshaping our world through comprehensive leadership, approaching issues in their great complexity, picking the right target, and addressing it with the assets. And this has a name too. And you must remember it, because to succeed, you will need to enter it. It's politics. Thank you.